Welcome back. No verdict, no decision made after day one of jury deliberations in Trump's New York trial. Jury members are asking to hear the testimonies of David Pecker and Michael Cohen again, as well as hear the instructions on how to consider the evidence again. Former President Trump asking the New York Court of Appeals to expedite the review of his gag order, telling Americans he'd love to be campaigning more right now. Watch.
This is 5 weeks. And 5 weeks of really essentially not campaigning, although I took a big lead in the polls over the last few weeks. Something's going on. Because I think the people of this country see that this is a rigged deal. It's a weaponized deal for the Democrats to hit their political opponent.
Joining us now is Trump 2024 National Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt. Karoline, thanks very much for being here. You've been in that courtroom every day, right?
We have, yes.
How's it going?
It's going, and we're excited to get back on the campaign trail, I will tell you that. We had a long day of jury deliberations yesterday, which will continue into today. And yesterday afternoon, the jury asked for a reread of the instructions from Judge Merchan, in addition to reviewing several pieces of evidence that were presented by the prosecution and the defense in the case, which tells us that the jury is confused, just like the rest of America, of the crimes that President Trump is being charged with from this George Soros-backed prosecution. There has never been evidence of the falsification of business records, even though we've been sitting in that courtroom for 6 weeks. And there has certainly not been evidence of this other felony that Alvin Bragg is trying to link those misdemeanors to, just so he could bring this case forward. So it's very confusing. That's how we feel the jury stands today, but we will see what happens today.
Joe, jump in here. I mean, I was confused also when the judge said that they didn't have to agree on that second felony. It could be, pick a crime.
Well, to your point, right? It's, the kind of Nancy Drew approach to trying to put a former president behind bars. And I think the question that all of us want to have is that how does the president stay on message, right? He's forced to basically be in that courthouse all day and all long. It almost feels, not to be a cynic, but that was the design, that this was all concocted to make sure that President Trump would be shackled to a courtroom and Republicans would be shackled to criminal cases across the country, up and down the ballot.
This was the plan the entire time. This entire case was concocted by Joe Biden, and that was proven this week, by the way, when Joe Biden's campaign held a press conference outside of the courthouse. And this case is being led by a Democrat prosecutor, Alvin Bragg. No other prosecutor in the country would ever take this case up because there is no crime. And we're seeing the result of that now play out. And it's also being overseen by a Democrat, highly conflicted partisan judge who has slapped a gag order on President Trump while overseeing this political persecution. They want to weaken him, not just our campaign, but also him physically and mentally being in that courtroom. Unfortunately for them, it is not working. I was with the president all day yesterday. We will be in there all day today. He is in great spirits. He is defiant, and we very much look forward to getting back on the campaign trail where he is continuing to dominate in the polls.
But this campaign issue, that the campaign came down to the courthouse, even Democrats are criticizing that bizarre press conference. Trump mocked actor Robert De Niro after his bizarre speech. Outside the trial Tuesday, he was with the Biden campaign. The actor fought with protesters as well. Watch this.
Donald Trump wants to destroy not only the city, but the country, and eventually he could destroy the world. But this city is pretty accommodating. We make room for clowns, but not a person like Trump who will eventually run the country. That does not work. We're trying to be gentlemen in this world. The Democrats, you are gangsters. You are gangsters. You.
You're a little punk. You're a softy. You're a
Watch your back.
You're trash.
They have a protest of Robert De Niro yesterday. He's a fool. He's a broken down fool standing out there, and he got maggot. He got maggot yesterday. He got a big dose of it.
That was so odd. Trump wants to destroy the world. I mean, what's it? He doesn't belong in my city. I mean, Trump, built so much of the city. What's De Niro talking about?
It was so bizarre to witness, and it is the sign of a very desperate and failing campaign. They ushered the campaign outside of the criminal courthouse. They teased this special guest, and they bring out a Hollywood elitist actor who is so out of touch with the American people. I was waiting on him to mention the word inflation or border or war. Those are the issues Americans care about. Didn't didn't mention any of that. And this just shows that the Biden campaign has no idea what they're doing. They don't have a message. The only people who support them in this country are out-of-touch elitist liberals like Robert De Niro, who no one in this country listens to.
It certainly did feel desperate to bring De Niro out, and I don't know what he was talking about, Todd.
And to that point, if they don't have this trial or any of the trials, what do they have? They have nothing, because nothing is going great in this country right now unless it is for those elites. And I think I totally agree. This was the biggest Hail Mary of all Hail Marys, and it showed. That was bad, Caroline.
Mark, how do you see it?
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously a fiasco, right? I mean, it's completely nuts. And you look at Robert De Niro, like, what happened to the guy? He used to be cool back in the day. Was it Meet the Parents? I don't understand. Like, where
Meet the Fockers.
Yeah, Meet the Fockers. Where he took a turn for the worse.
I'm just shocked that we've gone from a guy who, literally, this guy, Robert Anthony De Niro, who was a working class guy who made good in Hollywood, who's famous for saying the working man's not a sucker, and now he's walking up and down the streets calling half America a bunch of suckers. And so I just think that, I mean, to you and to your point, you know, getting the president to tap back into that blue collar coalition that made him president in 2016, how do we get all of those people rowing in the same direction, and some of the people that didn't vote for him the first time saying it's the economy, stupid, it's the border, and by the way, the guy that said he was going to be the return to normal president has left us with a world in complete and utter disarray.
Well, you would think that Biden is talking about the issues that matter to the American people, but he's not either. I mean, the Biden-Harris campaign launched a new 8-figure initiative to try and win back black voters that are moving away from the Democrat Party and moving toward Trump. In Philadelphia yesterday, look at this. President Biden claimed that they were better off under his economy than under former President Trump. Watch this.
Trump continues to lie by saying black unemployment was at a record low on his watch. The fact is, record low unemployment happened on my watch. Black small businesses are starting up at a faster rate in 30 years because of what we've done. The racial wealth gap is the lowest it's been in 20 years because of our efforts.
Well, he can yell all he wants, but at this time, most people are worried about their own personal standing, having to pay so much money for so many things out there right now with inflation where it is. Politico reporting that Democrats are in full-blown freak-out mode over Biden's bad polling numbers, Caroline.
Well, they should be in full-blown freak-out mode because Joe Biden went to his home state of Pennsylvania yesterday and couldn't even fill up half of an elementary school gymnasium. He has no support, and it's because his message is Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump. It is not the issues that matter to the American voter. He didn't talk about how he's going to actually bring down inflation and the cost of living for black voters and for all Americans. President Trump went to the Bronx, a deep blue city, a deep blue borough in this city just a few weeks ago. He had a crowd of more than 25,000 people. He is building the most diverse and broad political movement this country has ever seen, and it's because he's offering solutions to the issues that matter.
Yeah, they've got to be nervous about Trump keeping on in all of these Democrat bright blue areas for sure. Real quick, do you have any expectation on when we'll get a verdict?
No idea.
Okay.
Only God knows.
Yes. Caroline, thank you.
Thank you.
Karoline Leavitt there.